Hey guys, I'm finally here with Kroof. I feel like we have rescheduled so many times, and I feel so bad, and I'm so excited that we can actually finally be here and talk. I haven't gotten to speak with Kroof one-on-one yet, so I'm very, very excited. And this is the podcast is normally supposed to be coffee and games, and so I'm not allowed to have a lot of coffee anymore. But I did save some. This is literally it's from
Oh,
this morning. I actually saved it. It has pumpkin spice in it, which I'm really excited about.
ooh,
So
'tis the season.
I'm so excited. So if you would like to tell everybody where they can find you, when you stream, and yeah, pretty much just all about
Yeah,
you.
just a nice little introduction. Well, all about me. I was born in 2001. Just kidding. But I have a YouTube video or YouTube channel. I'm Kroof over on there, also on Twitch. I primarily do a lot of YouTube stuff. That's how I kind of got started. And especially with expansions rolling around, this is like the opportune time to be making content, speaking with the community, and just enjoying the work that is currently being done on the game. And also for Twitch, I stream over there Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and pretty much Friday. I'm typically on podcasts, but if not invited on the podcast, I might start up some Friday stuff. But yeah, doing a lot of content creation as a whole. It's been really fun.
Nice. And I actually saw on your YouTube channel that you were looking to make it into more of like a full-time thing. Have you been able to step
Mm.
toward that yet? Or is it still
More,
on?
a little bit more so. It's definitely gotten better, which is always the hope and the dream. And I hope this trajectory continues. But anything with internet content creation, there's so many mantras out there, but one that stuck with me is like you got to be comfortable with the highs and the lows of everything. But especially right now, I'm riding the high. I'm a pretty happy person, so I'm just really enjoying everything that I'm doing right now and the people that I'm getting to connect with.
Mhm. I feel like I've seen that a lot on your social media too. I feel like you were one of I'm going to probably shoot myself in the foot saying it the way I'm going to say it, but I feel like one of the areas that isn't really touched on for Guild Wars 2 as much are memes, and I feel like I see them
Oh,
mostly on your Twitter, and I absolutely love it. So I
yes.
don't know how you feel about that, or if you feel like you're filling an area that was missing previously, but
Filling a bit of a niche, perhaps, but
yeah.
I love Twitter so, so much. I follow so many people, and one day I realized that Twitter is kind of an untapped well for at least the Guild Wars 2 community. There's a
Mhm.
bunch of other categories of pop culture that really flourish on Twitter. And Twitter is so fast and easy, and there's so many wonderful pop culture references and memes to utilize and to pull from. And I just kind of use Twitter as a fun comical outlet,
Mhm.
and I've been noticing a couple more memes. Maybe the algorithm is like, you know what, Kroof, you're doing memes. We're gonna show you other people that do memes. But it's been a really fun time, and I'm always on the lookout for little Twitter clips and snippets to utilize.
Absolutely. It definitely, I feel like there's so much room to grow on Twitter and
Yeah,
other social media to begin with for Guild Wars 2. And it's just amazing, like the hype for when someone new is just talking about it and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna leap on that. We're gonna get that chance." It's
definitely.
incredible in the amount that people are doing. But did you always play Guild Wars 2? Did you always create content for Guild
Ooh.
Wars 2?
Well, I my history with the Guild Wars franchise. I was aware of Guild Wars 1 and I played it a little bit, and so that was always on like the back burner on my brain. And then when Guild Wars 2 was first being shown off around 2010, after seeing the very first trailers, I was hooked. Hook, line, and sinker. Thankfully, I can swim, so I survived. But it
Right.
was an instant attraction to the game. And I followed along its alphas and its betas, and I got into one of the betas and I played for its initial release. I did take a little bit of a break during season 1, but then during the Battle of Lion's Arch, I came back with a resolve like none other, and I just stuck with Guild Wars 2, and it has been a really great relationship ever since. And I've been loving the ride so far. But in terms of content creation, that didn't come until like the very beginning, or not the beginning actually, just before Heart of Thorns released. I started
Mm.
making some videos on YouTube, just like trying something out.
That's almost perfect. Do you feel like everything has evolved since then? Do you feel like gotten better with it? Because I still feel like I'm really bad at it,
Oh
honestly.
yeah. I mean, I think that's just kind of a natural thing that as you start doing stuff and you just always doubt yourself, it's kind of like you underestimate your own potential in life. And when I first started out, I was doing very simple videos. I was so nervous that I didn't even put any audio. It was just pure gameplay. And it was enough. I got some editing skills, but looking back at my early videos to now, oh, leaps and bounds. Olympic pole vaulting. Yeah, much improvement, but there's still, of course, always improvement to be done as you continue in whatever you do in life. So
Absolutely. And with you had said that you were doing a lot more with YouTube than Twitch. Do you think that will ever flip because of community, or do you prefer to actually have something that's edited that you can put out for people rather than just do stuff extemporaneously?
that's a really good question. And for a time, I did do a lot of Twitch to the point where I got burnt out on it. And only
Mhm.
recently did I pick it up again and create a schedule for myself. And I think having that schedule is really important. But I will always love YouTube and having that system where you can be by yourself and be with your own creativity
Mhm.
and create certain videos and certain ideas and then flesh them out in an editor. I love the magic that is YouTube and making YouTube videos. But I've also learned to really appreciate the live aspect of streaming and talking with people directly and playing with them.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I think I'm going to try to balance them as much as possible. I absolutely love YouTube, but Twitch has been growing in the community
Mhm.
with Guild Wars 2, which has been lovely to see. But I'm still going to be sticking with YouTube as well, but definitely spending some more time with Twitch and especially like watching you and other content creators. It's just a really wonderful like net of people to be like a part of.
That's so sweet because I honestly feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
I don't either. We're all in the same boat.
Especially with stream. It's just like I'm surprised anybody watches me because it's a lot of swearing and
I mean, hey, the internet is one mucky, weird place, and we find each other, and it's beautiful. I feel that way with YouTube sometimes. I'm like,
yeah.
well, I'm making a narrative video. I'm making like an elite specialization speculation video. I don't know if anyone's gonna like it, and so you kind of just you go with your gut,
Yep.
and then you lead where life takes you.
So speaking of which, what got you into doing those speculation videos? Like they're
Ooh.
honestly a lot of things that you've said have been pretty spot on. So I'm actually very curious.
I mean, I might be the years of just being around Guild Wars 2 that I might have picked up some ideas on how the game will go and just the gameplay, but I the one thing about Guild Wars 2 that I love so much is the class customization and how you can build your character, not only in terms
Mhm.
of role play, but in terms of combat. So when they started doing elite specializations back in Heart of Thorns, they opened a whole entire world for me where when expansions do come around, I do elite specialization speculation. That's a mouthful.
That's
And I
fantastic.
yeah, I create some fan-made specializations and what I would like to see, but then when they start teasing them, I of course start to think about what I can pull from the images. Sometimes it's a hit or a miss, and especially when we got the icons for End of
Mhm.
Dragons, everyone thought dual swords were thief and they ended up being guardian for the icon. And sometimes ArenaNet, you can't always tell what they're going to be doing, and I
Right.
love that about the company and this game in general, is that you always be on your toes for a little bit.
Mhm. That's awesome. I think it's been so much fun, and I feel like ArenaNet, especially recently, and how much they're getting into actually posting and having that
Yes.
communication with people is so integral and it's so huge. And I honestly applaud everything that they've been doing, but I feel like they troll people a lot. I feel like with all of this specialization stuff and everything that they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a first look and it's gonna be great. And you're like, oh, it's on Xingje, yeah, that's gonna be the focus. And then they're gonna show
Hmm.
something with mounts. And then there's gonna be two sky scale icons, and you're like, huh.
And you're like, what's happening? Tengu, why do you have it's the Tengu with the staff. What's happening?
Right.
And you start like going into like the conspiracy theories, and you're like, oh, wonder what else they're showing us that they're not explicitly talking about.
Mhm. And it's been a lot of fun because I don't coming from WoW and Final Fantasy 14 where just like with Guild Wars 2, I started very late in the game. And so, well, not super late for WoW, but I've never experienced anything like this, especially
Hmm.
because the combat is so hybridized and the idea that they have so many elite specializations rather than just coming out with new classes. I've never
Yeah.
experienced anything like, oh yeah, we're gonna just do a showcase on these three specializations, and then these three, and then these three, and you're like, oh, this is
This is
cool. Let's just
consistent.
show. And the betas right now, like
Oh,
that is so
yes.
incredible.
This is,
Have you tried every single one so far? Have you been a part of?
oh, you bet. I love the combat. I love the professions in Guild Wars 2. And with each elite specialization beta, this is very different than what they've done in the past.
Mhm.
With Heart of Thorns, we got to play them all. I think we played a couple chunks of certain specs, but then we played them all at once. And then in Path of Fire, we just played them all at once as well. And having this consistent stream of betas and being able to really dedicate time to these works of art that
Mhm.
are elite specializations and give proper feedback and like go in depth and see what, oh, this might work, oh, this might not work. It's been so much fun to do. And also just for content creation and like YouTube videos and streaming, it really drums up the community in a way that I've really missed from these expansions. And I think
Mhm.
they're knocking it out of the park this time around. And yes, even for the next three that come out, I'm definitely going to be dedicating that whole week to just testing each one of the elite specs. They've been wonderful.
So how do you test them? Because I've gotten
Ooh.
different things from different people. Like when I was speaking with Laura, she was like, "Well, I don't like to do build crafting. I don't like it. Like I'm
Yeah.
not good at it, so I don't like it." So I'm like, "Oh, this is fun. This is something that feels good to play, and this is something that the abilities are really cool." And then speaking with Muck and Teapot about it, they're like, "Well, I wanted to see what I could do against it in PvP and how I could counter it." And then I've also had people
Mm.
just like that I've seen on social medias that were like, "I wanted to see what the best build would be for benchmarks." So how
Oh,
what
yes.
do you look at? Do you look at all of them?
I definitely take some of those points into playing the betas because at the end of the day, I still want them to function well in certain game modes, like have proper damage numbers, be like able to be played in PvP in World versus World. Not everything's going to be the best, but overall, aside from those points, I really focus in on the elite specialization identity in
Hmm.
terms of like an aesthetic and the theme that it's hitting on. We are going into the realm of three elite specializations. And I think now more so than ever, I would like to personally see more specializing in a certain area of the game and
Hmm.
really fulfilling that because elite specializations are kind of like subclasses in a way.
Right.
I think that's how I would describe them to people who are outside of the Guild Wars 2 community because the title of elite spec might be like, oh, what's that? But I kind of view them as subclasses, and with that aspect of it, I really focus in on how does this work in the world of Tyria? How does this work as a class identity?
Hmm.
Is this damage focused? Is this power focused, Connie damage focused, healing, support, all that. And then I look to see if the traits feel good. I really just kind of go for, as ambiguous as this might sound, it's just a general vibe and a general feeling
Hmm.
to these elite specializations. And yeah, I like role play and fantasy of it all. So that's what I really focus on.
No, that's awesome. And do you feel like the new specializations are diverse enough from the older specializations so far?
Mm. I will have to say that I am not blown away yet. They're not bad by any stretch of the imagination,
Hmm.
but I have been slightly disappointed in certain elite specializations for a thematic element like the Harbinger. I feel like the way that they're going, and the way that it was shown to us in the first beta, I was expecting something a bit different from just torment con stacking,
Hmm.
and I would have liked to have seen the elixirs been expanded upon a little bit more.
A
Something along
mixologist.
those. Yeah,
That's what I
something
thought it was going to be.
something like that. So I think with now that we have multiple sets of elite specs, we really can go back and compare and contrast them.
Mhm.
And that's just the nature of going into multiple expansions, that I and the rest of us, we're not going to love every single elite specialization, but I will still give my opinion and my feedback appropriately. But these are good. They're okay. I'm definitely on the lookout for the next three. I hope the next three blow me away in terms of, the thief, the ranger, and the engineer that we have left.
Mhm. Do you have a favorite for what you've seen so far?
Mm.
Or is
In
something that's
terms,
worked kind of how you were expecting it would work with the teaser before you actually got the
all
gameplay?
right. I think I definitely have a top three, but the two that I like the most are probably Blade Sworn for its overall execution. Less than the theme I'm looking at. There's large, large car
It's
going
like,
by.
is there a
For
bear behind you?
I live by a very busy street. It is a constant struggle. But for the Blade Sworn, I think that was the elite spec that we have played so far,
Mhm.
that I would say that is probably able to be shipped like tomorrow. It
Mhm.
felt the most cohesive. It felt the most uh, entirely complete. But aside from the Blade Sworn, in terms of theme, I actually like the Virtuoso. Even
Mhm.
though I don't think the Virtuoso is necessarily ready to be shipped,
No.
I did like the ideas that they're going for and the feel of it.
Mhm.
I just wish that certain elements were changed, or, they went a little bit harder in certain areas of the Virtuoso. But those would probably be my top two.
I love, just on top of the theme, the actual name for Virtuoso. Because it's like you're
Yeah.
literally conducting with these daggers. And I just think it's absolutely incredible. And people are like, especially in my chat I don't know if you have gotten this too, but people were like, I don't get it.
I can see that. I can see it a little bit. I do think that they are going with a lot of different titles for
Mhm.
skills, like Blade Songs, Virtuoso, and then some idea of like dueling and psionics and mentality. So it is a lot to maybe take in,
Mhm.
but I think I've warmed up to enough to be like, it's the Virtuoso. Mesmer is already weird and wacky, so an elite spec that is weird and wacky is fitting for the Mesmer, I guess.
And I will say, I did see your video about the issue with Catalyst, and I thought maybe we should
Ooh!
discuss that a little bit here while we're on the subject. So if you
Yes,
want to
of elite
give an
spec.
overview of exactly what you thought about it and how you think it could be better, or what you think will change since this was a beta.
All right. Yeah, not the virtuoso, the catalyst video. I was surprised to see the response on my catalyst video, because I don't main elementalist, and it seemed like I had some agreement, of course, disagreement and like opposing ideas, but yeah, that video, I really just wanted to go into a full discussion of how I felt with the catalyst. And I think they made it to the point where it's almost biting off more than it can chew. There's a lot of ideas that were seen on the Tempest, the very first Elementalist elite
Hmm.
spec, ideas of the Weaver, and I feel like the Catalyst is almost like they're trying to cram both of them together.
Hmm.
And there's just so much with the Jade Sphere, the utility skills, that you have to be in that attunement to get the most out of the hammer. But also on the hammer there's this consistent orb mechanic that you have to try to balance and upkeep. So it almost feels like with Weaver there were so many skills, and I don't know if with this time around they felt like they had to one up themselves, but it was almost a little too complex, which is like I would expect for the next elite specialization with how complex the Weaver was, for the next one to be a little bit stripped back, a little bit more tame in its design. But it just felt like there was a lot going on.
Hmm.
And I would like to see some things changed, particularly with like the Jade Spheres. The utilities could be adjusted in terms of not needing to cast them in the sphere, but you can cast them, and if you go into it, you still gain that effect to be a little bit more fluid.
Hmm.
But the one thing about the Catalyst I liked the most were probably the traits. The traits were the saving grace to me. I was like, okay, the traits are cool. I like them. They are simple and they know what they're doing. But everything else about the catalyst, I was a little bit like, I can see an idea here, but I feel like it needs extensive workshopping.
I
But
felt
yeah,
the
did
same
you get to
way.
play the catalyst?
I
Yeah.
didn't play it. I actually purposefully
Oh.
didn't because Elementalist has been my main. And I
Oh, I
absolutely love
see.
Weaver. Tempest I thought was fun, but I like
Hmm.
swapping like as quickly as possible to get all of the combos in the fields and finishers I can come up with for my build. And so Tempest felt, I feel like I'm gonna say slow, and people in the comments for this are gonna be like, it is not slow, but it's because of the channel.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's a little bit more strategic. You kind of got to like plan a little bit.
Yeah, but the way I was trying to get into all of that content was I was trying to do everything as blind as possible. And so I was waiting to get into Tempest until Heart of Thorns, and then waiting to get into Weaver until Path of Fire. And then I was like, I could play the
Wow.
beta, because I actually did mess around with the first 3 Elite specs, and I liked Virtuoso best. But I was like, I feel like if I do that now, it'll be a cop-out, especially if I continue to have Elementalist be my main. Now, right now, I'm having a lot of fun with Necro, but if Elementalist is still my main, I kind of want to wait until I actually get into... until I actually
love
get
that.
into End of Dragons. But I did watch it, and I was hoping... It's funny, because you were saying about having it be scaled back, and I think the orb mechanic is okay. I like that it changes based on whatever spec, you know, you're in, whatever attunement.
Yeah.
But I was hoping to get Arcane as its own attunement. And I think that would have been so good. Like, I just, because the utilities for it are so cool. And especially for, like, one of my favorite things when I first started was theory crafting, with making sure I could counter anything that I came across in open world. So it was like, I had a stun break, I had a Condi cleanse, and then I was playing Dual Dagger Core. And so I would take some arcane abilities. Oh my gosh, I can't think it. Is it arcane missiles? That's the projectile that you.
Yes.
So I would take that. So I'm like, if I have to go back, throw down a field and then toss those, you know, and I just thought the idea and the flavor text for all of the arcane abilities would be really cool. And I was like, what if we could do something with arcane? And so I was hoping that the orb thing wasn't actually an orb in the picture. I was hoping that it, because it was purple-ish.
Yeah, what? That teaser too. It was like purple, and then it was not purple.
I know.
Like, they really pulled the carpet out of.
But I saw your face when I said arcane. Was that something that you were excited about, or that you wanted, or that you thought was too much?
No, absolutely. I would have loved arcane. My friends, when I talk to them, and just the people that I talk to on a daily basis, it's like when the catalyst was being shown, we were really excited for an arcane specialization for the elementalist, because it seems like it's there with the identity of the class. It just hasn't really been fleshed out with a proper attunement. And I would have loved to have seen like a longbow arcane elementalist. I know a lot of people have been saying that as well, or even a rifle. So when they unveiled the hammer, I was like, okay, ranged hammer? And then it really wasn't a ranged hammer. So yeah, the expectation of the arcane and that whole play style, I would love to see perhaps on another elite spec. I think the community as a whole, we're very aware that elementalists, this is something that people are interested in maybe exploring more. So perhaps in the next elite spec, we could maybe see some arcane, please.
I know.
I would love that.
Mine was, I wanted it to be, even though there was fiery grace, I feel like it's almost impossible to guess the weapon for elementalist, because you have so many of the elemental weapons that you can procure. And so everybody's like, what do you want? And I'm like, I want a greatsword. And they're like, well, there's already fiery greatsword. And I'm like, well, there's also a longbow and an axe.
When we were doing just before it was unveiled, people would say like, oh, they can't get any of the conjure weapons. And I'm like, they never said that they would not be implementing weapons just because they have conjure weapons. I'm like, even look at Guardian. They had longbow for their spirit weapon, and they ended up getting longbow on the Dragon Hunter. So it's like, I think every weapon is fair game in Guild Wars 2.
And can I just say, I think now that you've brought up Dragon Hunter, that that is
Mm.
the coolest story of how that comes about. Like, I don't want to spoil too many people too much if we end up getting new people.
Spoiler button.
Sorry, guys. But I just think it's so cool. And I hope
Hmm.
that one of my biggest hopes for End of Dragons is that we'll see more of that for like reasoning and story behind classes and class changes, especially going into Cantha and having those like Asian type themes for a lot of what they're doing. And I'm really excited because it seems like they've been focusing a lot more on story. And I don't know if it's because they've seen it work for like other MMOs and they're like, okay, we're going to kind of focus on this a bit more. But I don't know how you feel about it, but I think that they've been going in that direction. And I really hope to see that a lot
I
more.
am 100% with you. I love the story and the world of Guild Wars 2, of Tyria and the professions. And while I love the combat, I do think there
Mhm.
is so much joy that people get from seeing these things in the lore, in the game, the story, especially with End of Dragons going into Cantha, how how combat techniques and magic and technology has changed over so many years from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 2.
Mhm.
So I'm super excited to see that with End of Dragons.
And since you're so into speculation and
Mm.
seeing if you can come up with any of these ideas, what do you think we will see from Hunter? I'm sorry, Ranger Hunter.
Same thing.
Ranger and Thief. We said Dragon Hunter, and so I'm
Ooh.
like Hunter on the mind.
I think I love speculation is so fun, but there is a part of me that loves always being wrong or when I get something wrong and I'm like, I was completely off the mark. So
Mhm.
I don't play a lot of Thief, but I think this time around you don't really need to kind of with elite specializations, it's all fair game. You don't have
Mhm.
to main the class. They expand beyond that. So I think with Thief, because we did get an image of what looks to be a scepter, I would
Mhm.
love to see some more magic on the Thief. I think the Deadeye touched on it a little bit with their cantrips, but with this being Cantha and maybe ritualistic ideas and the old professions, maybe we've seen like the old professions of the assassin and the ritualist kind of mixed together to be the proper thief.
Mhm.
And I would love to see that idea. I would love to see maybe some more magic, a little bit more ranged application for the thief. Maybe even a little bit of group support to be, valued in a group setting.
Mhm.
But as for Ranger, oh dear. I would have loved to have seen like a Beastmaster Ranger where we could have like both of our pets out at once,
Mhm.
or something that is a little bit more focused on the pet because Druid didn't really do much with the pet. Soul Beast kind of got rid of it a little bit in a pseudo way.
Mhm.
So I would have loved to have seen a little bit and would like to see a little bit more about the pet, but the teaser image out of all the teaser images, it was the most stripped down. It was
Mhm.
just the silhouette. There wasn't really an indicator of a profession mechanic that we saw in the other um, teaser images. So I was really like, when I was looking at the image and doing the video, I was like, I really don't have much to go off of on this. It
Right?
was just like, there's a hammer.
Mhm.
Okay.
I just saw it was people were like, it's bunny thump times two.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is supposed to be. And I feel like that's been across the board too. And I
Yeah.
thought, I don't know why I thought this, but I talked to my husband about it and I was like, yeah, I think for this first look, kind of like when they did with the original, they showed off the Virtuoso a little bit and did the release trailer and then didn't show the gameplay as much until they had the other two elite specializations. And I was like, so I think that's what they're either going to do with, or I think I said, I think that's what they're going to do with Thief. And then we didn't. And instead we got the Ranger teaser. And I was like, is that even a teaser? Like, are they trolling us? Is
They're
this
like,
part of what I
here's
was?
a splash art image. Have fun.
Yeah,
See you
right?
next week.
We like all of your theory crafting. We'll be sure to retweet it.
Yeah. It was they've been I do love that they are giving us these teasers no
Hmm.
matter how small or how, stripped down the things that they're showing us because they've
Hmm.
they've been wildly varied through all the teasers. Like one
Yep.
teaser had like the full artwork of the great sword for the Vindicator. The other one had like the armor skin that was fully detailed, but then other ones it's just like a blank canvas.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, there's a lot of variation between the teasers.
Absolutely. And speaking of the way you were talking about Thief and having it be more like assassin and thiefy and like to be able to steal things, one of the things that my husband was talking about was in that image how you have the scepter, but then there's nothing in your other hand. And so he was saying, wouldn't it be cool to actually steal like a weapon, like the weapon
Another
abilities?
weapon.
Yeah. And
That
just
would
have
be really
like,
interesting.
yeah, to actually have it be stealthy like that. And at first I was like, that's a lot. But then I was like, wait, they do that for those abilities. So maybe,
Yeah.
and the weapon abilities are already in the game. So I guess, but yeah, because he's like, but there's nothing in the other hand. And I'm like, I know.
That's actually a really interesting concept now that I think
Right?
about it. Especially because Thief, their third ability changes depending on the offhand weapon. So maybe like an elite spec for Thief, you would steal the offhand and you'd have more Thief abilities for that weapon. And the third skill would change depending on the scepter or whatever is in your main hand.
Right.
That's actually a really like, if they wanted to put that mentality of Weaver and having so many skills, if they wanted to do that for a Thief elite spec, I say go for it. Give some Thief really main some love. Yeah.
Now that he's talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I could see that, and it would be a lot of fun. I don't think it'll happen or that it will work, but I think it's a lot of fun.
That part.
And I feel like we've talked about so many other professions and classes and specializations other than what your main is. What has stolen your heart to play most currently?
Well, I grew up a small bean playing World of Warcraft, and I loved playing that support playstyle. I was a priest, I was a paladin, a shaman. I first made a mage thinking I could heal, and I was very wrong. So I, when going into any MMO since then, I really gravitated towards that support playstyle and almost like that holy knight there for your friends. And my very first profession that I gravitated towards was the Guardian, and I've stuck with it ever since. Back in the day, Guardian necessarily there wasn't a whole lot of support emphasis back in vanilla Guild Wars 2, but with the expansions, I was really happy to see a lot of emphasis on group support and group play. And so with the elite specs and just over the years of changing skills, Guardian is one of my most played classes. And then juxtaposed to that, on the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, I also play a lot of Necromancer. So I'm like, I want that holy aesthetic, but I also want to, summon weird, decrepit monsters to do my bidding and poison and corrupt people. So, I have the best of both worlds, as Hannah Montana would say.
So, okay, the burning question is, because I get picked on about this and told that my perception of these things is very weird. So do you think the Necro minions are cute? Because I do. I think in a weird way, they're absolutely adorable. I'm like,
you know what? Shadow Fiend can steal my heart any day. Shadow Fiend is very cute. I could, yeah. I would have a pet Shadow Fiend. They're just like globs of dark like matter that are just like have eyes. And I'm like, I want to squish you. Do you think the flesh golem is cute?
That was the one I was talking about, actually. Like pointy nose face thing. I don't know if it's supposed to be a horn or
maybe like a really weird terrestrial land dolphin. Sure. Like maybe, I guess.
Like right when I got it, because I actually boosted my Necro, because I ended up messing around with it in PvP. And it was like the first time I'd ever PvP'd, and I was having so much fun, and I was like, okay, I really love Necro, and I'm going to boost it because I've already looked at all of the abilities, and I've already done, like, the story up to, all of this. And so I'm like, I'm not really missing out on anything. Of course, I'm going to do the story for the Asura, because it's an Asura, and I haven't finished the story for it. I can do it on another character. And I'm like, I summoned the Flesh Golem, and I was like, this is the cutest thing ever. And then, like, right after, I think my little Asura was like, I'm death incarnate. And I was like, it's so cute.
You're like, cuteness overload. You're like, this is so ooh-woo. Like, it's just giving me, like, ooh vibes.
And everyone else is like, oh. Yeah. They're like, I think we have different definitions of cute. And I was like, but it's like the ugly duckling. It's like so ugly that it's cute. People have dogs like that.
Whatever floats your boat. That's what I love about so many people playing Guild Wars 2 is that you have so many different tastes, so many different ideas of what people enjoy, what people dislike, and it's just like this wild, humorous, funny situation. And I love that. I love that you're the one that you think is the cutest is a flesh golem. I love that. I genuinely do. This is so cool.
And so,
smoothly transitioning.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned that on Fridays, quite a few times, you'd said, I'm part of a podcast. So I'm going to go a bit deeper and say, so the Lightbringers podcast that I believe is what you're referring to.
Yes.
How did you get into that? Because I feel like you're a regular. And how did you transition into doing that? Because you said that you were streaming on Twitch and you felt like you'd burnt out and then you were focusing more on YouTube. And I feel like a lot of people who start to focus more on YouTube when they're in podcasts and doing interviews are very thoughtful about what they want to say. Like it's not as much of an off the cuff. It's like kind of a waiting and then speaking. So how did you get introduced to Lightbringers and how did you feel actually being on the show? Did it feel like a smooth transition into like more of an interview and talk show style?
Well, I've known Jebro for a hot minute, and growing up, I was like 12 or 13 watching Jebro and a bunch of other content creators. And so when I got to meet and work with Jebro a bit more, it was like really surreal for me. I was like, oh my God, I grew up watching you. And eventually he started doing the podcast Lightbringers, and he pulls from multiple content creators and gets them on. But more so recently during this expansion circuit, it seems that we've kind of just stuck with, very familiar people. And so he asked me to come on once. I said, sure. I was extremely nervous. I'd never done a podcast before. So I was like, literally, my heart was racing so fast. I was so sweaty and anxious. So that was the first time. And then I wasn't asked back for a bit because he was getting other people, but then End of Dragons rolled around and he was like, hey, you wanna come on? I was like, I did it once, I can do it again. Sure, let's go. And from there, I typically, what ended up happening was that it was myself, Jebro, Bird of Chess, Rook. Bird of Chess is actually going to be a different brand name soon. So Rook
I know, I'm so excited.
And Boots. I am so excited too. And we ended up just kind of whatever might have happened. The universe our schedules all lined up and we kept getting asked back. And I've really enjoyed working with them and podcasting with them. We've grown to have a really good energy and a great rapport. And I really value them as people, but I guess I would also say friends. I'm pretty friendly with everyone. And I've really just enjoyed this whole experience with them. But for me, doing podcasts, I'm a very baseline, even outside of on-camera work, YouTube or Twitch. I'm a very active, hyper, very happy, peppy person. And so going into the situation of taming yourself down a bit and learning when to talk, when to speak, when to have a funny moment, when to do that, it really is a skill. And I've hopefully learned so much. And so far, it's been going really, really great. And just doing podcasts with them have been so fun. So yeah, it's been a learning experience, but it's been a really great time.
Absolutely. I hadn't done a podcast in a really long time. Well, I hadn't been on someone else's podcast in a really long time. Since I had played 14. I did one with Guild right when I started playing Guild Wars 2. And when I was asked to be on Lightbringers, and you were just talking about when you should talk and it being a skill. I had no idea when we were live or if we weren't live anymore because it was like 3 hours. And
yeah, they can get pretty long.
And then I'm like slamming a couple whiskey diets.
You're like, I'm just enjoying my time.
And then I literally watched it after, and everybody was like, wow, we had so much fun. Like this had so much energy. And I feel like all of the Lightbringers podcasts do. Like everybody just really vibes really well. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting here going, oh yeah, the energy was great. And I'm talking to my husband and I was like, I was so drunk.
You're like, I was 5 sheets to the wind. There
Yeah.
was no coming back for
I mean,
that.
it was
But
fun.
yeah. Oh, honestly, podcasts, if you're having fun and as long as the energy is coming across, I think ultimately
Mhm.
that's what is the most important because people listen to podcasts and listen to content for enjoyment and fun.
Mhm.
Sometimes debate and sometimes critical thinking too.
Mhm.
But there has to be that fun element. And Lightbringers, Jebra has been doing a wonderful job. And just not only the people that he's selecting and asking, but just overall the community in Guild Wars 2. I've gotten along with pretty much everyone. I don't think there's one person that I've really like had a bad time with. Not
Right.
one.
Yeah. Same. I feel like
Yeah.
everyone's a lot more down. I guess a lot more down to earth wouldn't than I was expecting wouldn't be the way to put it. But it's like with certain games and certain communities, there can be a hierarchy, I guess is the best
Yes.
way to put it. And there are some people that being in certain situations, you wouldn't even ask to be on a podcast. And I feel
Yeah.
like I haven't felt that way at all with Guild Wars 2. And it's been like everybody that I've spoken to has been completely down to earth, a ton of fun. And even if you disagree on something, you can have a really fantastic conversation and debate, like you had said. And it just ends up being a really incredible time. And I think that it's really entertaining for a lot of people. And the amount of people, yourself included, that have even said yes to being on the podcast, I'm just like, that's cool.
Oh,
Like, that's cool.
yeah.
It's
This year, I've just been saying yes to everything. Just
like,
yes, yes,
yes,
yes.
man.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you want $500? Sure. I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
it hasn't gotten to that extent yet.
And you had mentioned, it was so cute because you're like, I grew up listening to Bro, and I'm
Yes.
like, I feel old.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the I think I am probably the youngest in the Guild Wars 2 partner program right now, and like growing up around this community has been really eye-opening and a great teaching
Mhm.
tool. I feel very fortunate to have had a really great time on the internet, and I've almost used it as like a third parent or a mentor to be able to connect with other people and like sympathize and empathize with them and learn
Mhm.
how people are different and really just cherish that. And so that's just like standard, but definitely growing up and now doing content creation and getting to interact with these people like Jebro and Boots and Aurora Peachy and these people that were like the
Mhm.
OGs on the Guild Wars 2 scene. It's like, oh my God, like this is weird. This is surreal.
Yeah,
So
I totally get it.
it's been a lot of fun.
But it was, but like right when you mentioned it, I was like, I'm so old. It grew
No,
up.
you have more wisdom than I.
Oh yeah. That's it.
It's all about the perspective.
And speaking of the community and how you'd said that a lot of things, especially with videos, a lot of people can debate. I feel like
Mm.
recently I've come across, and I don't know if you feel this way, but a lot of debate, at least from Guild Wars 2, and I don't know if it's because the builds and the style of combat for Guild Wars 2 is so just completely like the ideas are out there. You can it's massive. I feel like most of the debates I've seen on are whether or not a build is viable. I don't know if that's a
Mm.
thing for you, but I feel like I'm not even talking about that in stream. And someone's like, oh, I like this utility you're using. And I'm explaining why. And then other people are like, well,
It's not viable.
I feel
That's
like
not
that's what
meta.
I see mostly. I'm just like, so I don't know if you've seen that as well, but just I feel like the debates mainly are if raiding is ever going to come back, and if
Yeah.
we're ever going to have more raids, and if
And I
builds are
love
any
that.
good.
I love that we are having these conversations and
Hmm.
rating, particularly in a PvE setting. This is where the concept of build metas and what is effective, that's where that really shines. So for someone who rated quite a bit and has since kind of paused because it's like there wasn't really a scene for it,
Hmm.
I'm loving that people are more interested in raids and other Guild Wars 2 content creators like Snezbor and Teapot are really trying to, push it and reinvigorate this scene.
Mhm.
But in the topic of build effectiveness and what's meta, I do think that people should be cognizant of under what system they're talking about. Are they talking
Mhm.
about endgame rating? Are they talking about competitive PvP? Are they talking about competitive world versus world? Because I'm the type of person where in open world PvE, I will never criticize anyone's build that they are playing, because in open
Same.
world, it's for pure fun. I come up with wacky builds all the time. And I've watched many, many other content creators and get inspired by them constantly, where they just create really specified builds that, objectively speaking, have no place and no use in endgame content. Just that fun factor. But on the other hand, I do think that when you do enter these conversations of endgame content, you should recognize that there are people that want to do it to the best of their ability and want to have groups that are able to complete bosses effectively. And so the people that want to run highly meta comps, complete power for them to do that. And
Mhm.
it is completely understandable. And I do see some people saying, like, oh, that's elitist. And I'm not really worried about elitism. I'm more worried about, are we being toxic in this environment?
Yeah.
Because you can be, you can have the desire to be like the top echelons of the rating community or the PvP community. That is someone's individual desire, and like, power to you, go for that.
Mhm.
But and I think we all should be a little bit, aware that when this becomes toxic and when we are bashing other people, and
Mhm.
especially when you start bashing people for open world builds, or they're doing a dungeon with their friends and they're like, oh, don't take that, take this. And it's like, okay, well, a recommendation every here and there could be useful, especially if someone is struggling. But it's like, there are certain times and places when just having fun is important.
Right. And I feel like, especially on the brink of toxicity, like you were mentioning, and I don't feel like for Guild Wars 2 it is that. I just feel like
It's not that big of a
it's what
problem
a lot of
currently.
people communicate about. It's just like,
Yeah.
if we're gonna have a conversation, it's gonna be about builds. I'm just
Mhm.
like, okay. But especially for like when you compare it to other games though, like I absolutely love Final Fantasy 14, but one of the rules in it is you're technically not allowed to use DPS meters. And you're also technically not allowed to talk to anybody about what they're doing and how they're playing. Because if anybody
Oh.
finds it offensive, and I feel like that kind of cultivates it almost cultivates a community where even if you're trying to help somebody out, that person's going to find it offensive. And
Yeah, that could happen as well.
then they report you. And it's actually kind of a thing, a bigger thing in Final Fantasy 14 that's kind of incredible. So when you mentioned it, I'm like, yeah, it's actually really good that we're able to talk about builds and discuss things
Yeah.
and actually talk about the differences as well, because that's something that, I mean, you can do in 14, but the how people perceive that actual line
Hmm.
is very different, and they can report you even
Very
if
blurry.
they feel like threatened is a strong word, but even if they feel threatened at
Or
all.
just generally questioned in like
Hmm.
their efficacy in the game. I love that. Yeah, that's actually, I was not aware of that in Final Fantasy 14.
Hmm.
And that makes me even more appreciative of how the game is run and the community that we have, where we can have these very level-headed discussions about what is good, what is bad,
Hmm.
under what system of the game are we talking about, and all that
Right.
stuff. But yeah, so far I haven't really encountered personally a lot of toxicity
Oh
or,
yeah, me neither.
blatant exclusion for ridiculous reasons. But rating scene, I hope that they continue to go above and beyond. And if people want to have like strong rating comps, advertise that and make sure everyone is aware.
Yeah,
Just
right.
in general.
And speaking of not having that be something that ArenaNet has been focusing on, are you excited about the challenge mode strikes as almost a
Mm.
substitution?
I forgot about that. Challenge mode strikes. I was always just like, oh yeah, strikes, they're coming. That's awesome. But yeah, I sometimes forget about the challenge modes.
Hmm.
I myself am not the most hardcore player.
Hmm.
I would categorize myself as a very dedicated player who has a lot of love for the game. But I'll probably check out a couple of the challenge modes. I think depending on what they plan for End of Dragons in terms of how fast future content will come, if
Mhm.
there's going to be a saga, when is that going to happen, plans for other expansions, etc., etc. But there's always a little bit of a downtime in expansions, so I will probably be hitting a couple of those challenge modes, and I'm excited to see how strikes are responded to by the community if they are going to be this new form of endgame rating. Because I
Right.
think it's a good idea. It's
Mhm.
like a one boss arena, and it's similar to like Final Fantasy 14, kind of like I believe they're called trials or
Yep.
something along those lines. And if it allows the developers to implement more consistent content while having that challenging aspect for that demographic of player, by all means, I would be totally fine with just doing more strike missions and, seeing a raid every like once a year or every other year, something like
Mhm.
that.
And what I think is neat about it too is it almost follows the theme of you can play this on your own time and you don't have to worry about things. So it's kind of like how dungeons, whilst fun and a lot of the mechanics are very unique and sometimes not as intuitive for you to figure out. So it makes it even more fun. It's like the amount of time that you could spend on a dungeon, especially doing it at the specific level that it should be done with the specific gear, could take a really long time. And so having fractals almost be that substitute is really neat, and it makes it so that people are able to do those and farm those more while still having a schedule for something else like work and not having to worry about spending 45 minutes to an hour somewhere. So while I really love raids, especially in MMOs, so it's very weird to me that there haven't been any new ones, but I haven't finished all
Mm.
of the wings yet anyway. But I do think the idea that they're having challenge mode strikes is actually really cool, and it does follow that theme of, well, these are here when you're able and they're quick. So,
Hmm.
whilst also still being
Faster.
challenging. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Something, anything is good at this point when we've had a drought of endgame
Content.
content. Yeah, more content is good content, even if I don't absolutely love it. But I have high hopes for these strike missions and the challenge modes as well. And I know they'll
Absolutely.
knock it out of the park.
And just with End of Dragons being almost on the horizon, I feel like I keep
Mm.
saying that and I'm like, oh, it's so far away. It's February. And then earlier today, I was like, wait, it's October. Like, it's
It'll be
actually,
November before
yeah,
we know it.
exactly. How do you feel? Because I feel like I had talked about the first look with a lot of people, and a lot of people were unsure about fishing and how it would play out. And they were like, well, I'm going to wait and see the actual demonstration, and then I'll decide
Mm.
if it's something that Guild Wars 2 should have and if it's active enough to be a part of all of the features in Guild Wars 2 because they're all unique and very active. Like even, finding ingredients and putting them together to learn a recipe for crafting and things like that.
Hmm.
It's very active. So now that we actually have a demonstration, did you see the demonstration and how do you feel about it?
Oh yes, the fishing. I have seen it. Uh, I guess I'll touch on a little bit of like the history of like the conversation around fishing for the entire game's life. I really remember a time when people were really hoping for fishing and being like, "Oh, with an expansion, it would be a great crafting profession or something to do, fishing." And I'm just like, I remember that time when a lot of people were saying fishing, and then now it's kind of weird because I feel like some people are almost disappointed in fishing. But from my perspective, seeing the streams, I was really impressed with it. It has
Mhm.
a mini game feature, and I think that was kind of the bare minimum of my excitement of like you should have a mini game for me to feel engaged and excited to do this form of crafting and this form of
Mhm.
gathering. And so I'm really excited. I guess also like the introduction of skiffs and it could be a very community based and driven thing is really interesting. So I personally am excited to try fishing out. Now, in other MMOs, I'm not an avid fisher or crafter or gatherer,
Mhm.
so it wasn't like the top of my list at the
Right.
beginning. I would have loved to have seen like other features that are more standard in MMOs, but I think this is a long time coming and it's good. I think it's so far that what we've seen, we haven't played it yet, but it looks objectively decent and
Yeah.
good. So I'm excited.
And I love having a little bit more of that background too, because that was something that I didn't know about. And all I kept hearing was, oh, I know it was a meme, but it was just, this expansion
Hmm.
is going to be just fishing, and that's way
Yeah.
too casual. You're making Guild Wars 2 into an even more casual game, even though, like, for some people it is. And it
Yeah.
was just funny because that it's amazing to actually hear that people were excited to have it originally and that they're finally putting it in, because it feels like they're pulling all of the stops with End of
Yeah.
Dragons, with having, the more masteries. Because it's like, was it over 500 or 600 that they had talked about for the mastery level that
I
they were
think
getting to?
I think from what we saw of the live streams, it's just resting at, I think, 461. So it's almost at
461.
500.
Okay.
So they're putting in a very decent chunk of
Mm-hmm.
masteries in this expansion. In terms of the points,
Right.
how
And
like they can have varying costs to
right.
each mastery. Yeah.
And everything looks absolutely gorgeous. You have the skiffs, which is almost another mount. It's kind of like a utility thing, like gliding almost. And then the elite specializations that they're putting in are very different. I'm still hoping for Tengu. I'm one of those people, I'm hoping that, because you can't just say everything that you're going to do, right? Like
Yeah.
all of this conversation is really good.
Mhm.
But I feel like there's some things that you just have to leave.
Wait.
And
You gotta tug them
yeah.
along.
So I'm still hoping. I mean, I'm like, we're seeing, Tengu with even if it isn't Tengu, I feel like there's something that
There's
they
something
haven't
else.
given us yet. And I don't
I
know
hope
if
so
you feel
too.
that way or what you're hoping it is, but I feel
I've definitely felt that just reading like tweets from developers, comments that they make on live streams.
that.
I definitely think that it is smart for marketing reasons to kind of hold a couple things to your chest
Mhm.
right before the launch, like a couple months before. And I'm in the same boat. I will galvanize the community to ask for Tengu.
Mhm.
I absolutely love Tengu, and seeing things like them wielding a staff, a weapon type that we've never seen them wield before. Yes, the animations weren't completely there, but they could be working on it.
Right.
Seeing different Tengu models, different faces, different feather patterns. I mean, Tengu, I believe, is one of the most updated non-player character models
Mhm.
in game, aside from maybe one other. But in Heart of Thorns, they got completely new rigs. They got new faces, new hairstyles, new texturings. And then it seems in End of Dragons, they're doing the same. So I would love to see all of that hard work in terms of creating these characters and these models be able to be played by the players.
Mhm.
And they kind of share a rig to a char. They have tails. They have like these horn things. Just
Right.
do a couple. I know, adding races are so easy. You just ask for it and they're there. But I would love Tengu so, so much.
Yeah. I'm super excited, and I really hope that regardless what it is, that there is something that they just, even if they don't say anything about it, and then you
Yeah.
get into the game and you're like,
You're like,
oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
they did it with the Griffin in Path of Fire.
That's
So
what people were
it,
saying.
it wouldn't be the first time. Arena, you always like to have a couple things deep in the books.
Yes.
You know what? I respect
Let's do
that.
it. And you know what everybody wants. So
Yeah, please. I'm convinced. I'm not convinced, but I would love if there was a mastery line and that it's like the Tengu mastery. And at the very end, when you complete it, because a lot of the lore masteries were seen as not being great.
Mhm.
Final reward for the Tengu mastery is that you unlock the Tengu and you can play them. That would be delicious. That would be so
yeah.
nice.
Absolutely. And it would, especially because there are some people that aren't fans of masteries because there are certain things that you do to level up your masteries that don't necessarily coincide with the mastery itself. Like, oh yeah, I'm leveling up auto loot by just killing stuff in Central Tyria, and I'm learning how to use a glider by killing stuff in Heart of
killing
Thorns.
things, yeah.
Not that that's all it is and that you get the experience from, but it would be cool if, especially if they took that a lore mastery like that and actually made it lore based.
Yeah.
That would be
where you have to
cool.
like do things for the Tengu and like go meet these certain people to unlock the mastery track or something along those lines. Like masteries as a system as well are getting quite big. So I feel like we should maybe have an expansion. Maybe this is the expansion to really just explore and say, you know what, masteries are not just movement things. They're not just gliders or mounts. They can be these
Mhm.
other cool lore things, these new races, these whatever they come up with. So
Right.
I'm excited to see if they have anything else to share, of course.
Absolutely. And is there something that you're really hoping to see that we haven't discussed yet for End of Dragons? Like something that's on your wish list that or something that you want it to work a specific way? Anything like
I think Tengu are pretty high up there,
that?
but I would also, I mean, I would love to see maybe just updates to certain spell effects over time because, you know, the game is aging, of course, but
Mhm.
I would love to see more focus on spell effects and refining maybe older textures and just making the game a little bit more visually modern for newer players. But that could also just be like a dedicated
Mhm.
patch that they do down the line. But as for End of Dragons, I mean, Tengu, more dedication to endgame content and a really good conclusion to the stories.
Mhm.
Because for both expansions, they've been good conclusions, but they've left something to be desired. I want this to be visually impactful and really good
Yeah.
for an ending for End of Dragons.
That yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with a title like that.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Gotta have like the best ending, the visuals, the music,
Mhm.
the environment, all that.
But I love how you talked about the dedication and the enhancements. And one of the things that I think is really cool that they have already discussed is almost having like a utility tutorial for people. Like
Yeah.
that's really good. And I feel like I love how they've been how ArenaNet has actually been listening. And so it's like and I feel like it's a lot of things I've come across with other new players for my podcast is I'm like, okay, so as a new player, what do you feel like the game is lacking? And it's like, you know, a proper tutorial rather than having something in the achievements that someone has to point out or
Mm,
you know, trial and error, which is actually what I like. I felt the complete opposite. But I
I
can
do too.
see I can see what
Yeah.
other people might want, especially coming from other MMOs. And how are you going to get the population for the game that you love? They have to come over from other MMOs. And so I feel like I love how they've been sneaking stuff in too, because I didn't actually read the patch notes for the fields and finishers being highlighted
Mm,
on your
mm-hmm.
UI, which I thought was really cool. And I was like, okay. And now them adding this actual like almost tutorial for these utilities is really, really cool. And I just feel like they're really listening. And I just think that's all on its own. I think that's really neat to begin with.
As a
And I,
veteran, yeah, I agree.
yeah. And the story, okay. So especially for the endings of expansions, for Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, which one did you like better?
Oh my God, this is actually perfectly connecting to a script that I'm actually writing right now.
Oh no,
In
did we know
terms,
about? No, I'm just kidding.
no, ooh,
That's totally a plug for.
insider.
No, go.
In terms of favorites, there is something I would probably agree with a lot of people that say that Path of Fire probably had a really great overall story, but there's something about Heart of Thorns and that storyline
Mhm.
which I absolutely loved. I loved the biological and psychological horror tones and settings and themes with that.
Mhm.
I think that was the most, I felt like Heart of Thorns had the most eerie and creepy
Yes.
tone. Iceboot Saga was trying to do that, but I think
Mhm.
Heart of Thorns was like the best thing that they could have done for that. And the ending to that in Heart of Thorns, I really, I'm more so disappointed in how Morgermoth looks, and he does look a little chunky, a little turtle like a kappa. And while I have these criticisms, I do love the entire story of Heart of Thorns.
Mhm.
So for that reason, that would probably be my number one. But I'm currently doing a fun creative thing where I rewrite uh, Heart of
Oh.
Thorns and do that stuff.
Wait, are you
I have
allowed
a
to? Are you able to expand upon that for everybody, or is it too early in the works and you don't want to?
no, I talked about it on stream yesterday. Actually,
Okay,
I
perfect.
was streaming yesterday and it gave me the inspiration, but I I go to college for majoring in English writing, so I love
Oh,
writing, I love
after my own
stories.
heart. Oh, I
I
love
love
that.
writing and all that stuff. So I've, of course, played Heart of Thorns for quite a while. And I was talking yesterday, I was like, you know what would have been really cool if Mordramoth was a queen and mimicked the pale tree. Because, you know, we have the pale tree as the female model, but Mordramoth is this husky man, strong thing. I was like, what if she was this really manipulative queen? And the Sylvari kind of already have this knight system. So I was like, what if it's just like a battle between two queendoms? And so I'm kind of like, I'm keeping a lot of Heart of Thorns, but I'm going to try to like answer the question, what if Mordramoth was a queen instead of like this just hulking beast and was like a bit more of that classic knight tale?
I love that. And for a couple of personal reasons, because when I was going through the story, all I wanted to do was surmise what was going to happen. So I had a lot of predictions, and one of my absolute favorite predictions that I had was obviously when, an elder dragon dies, like, and all of that power goes out, and obviously because of this Sylvari having that sort of knighthood and that you had mentioned, and just that personality of having a strict thing that they're fighting for, and there's no in between. It's you're good or you're bad, or we think you're good or we think you are bad. And I thought it would have been cool if the pale tree was actually not necessarily evil, but looking for that power. Like, what if the pale tree could actually suck up some of that power? And so I thought it would be really cool if, because the Sylvari were so closely connected to Mordramoth, like you had said, and with it being almost like Warring Nations, like Battle of the Queens, that it would be cool if the pale tree was actually saying and doing everything that she was in order to get the Sylvari to fight
That would be
Mordramoth.
really interesting.
Right? Because then all like and then having it be so closely connected because it had grown up and under the pale tree as well when it was really starting to expand. I mean, obviously they're all part of more, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so when it's gone and it does like that combusty type thing that they do with all of the power going out, if the idea was that the pale tree wanted that power so that she could, control her little night minions. So and everybody was like, no, you don't pick on our pale tree mother.
Not
like,
mommy pale.
Yeah.
No.
But so I love this idea. Like I actually think this is really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the story, and particularly with Heart of Thorns. And interestingly enough, early concepts of Mordramoth. I know elder dragons are not gendered specifically anymore, but Mordramoth was referred to in early concepts as she and her. So I got this idea because like the pale tree is also the female representation of Sylvari, and I'm like, what if they were like queen sisters that had an issue and then like they woke and all that stuff. So I'm currently working on that. I'm really excited to finish it.
I'm excited for you to finish it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I actually agree with you too on well, what's really funny is a bunch of people had asked me on stream and they're like, which is why I brought up the question, they're like, which expansion do you like better? Which ending? And I'm like, okay. So I like core and both of the expansions for different reasons, and I think they all shine in different ways. But as far as story goes, even with the ending, I liked Heart of Thorns more. And it's because of that, the horrific things that and again, like you said, I know they tried to do that with Path of Fire, and they tried to pull at your heartstrings with Blast and the gods and everything like that, and it's like being forsaken and all of this stuff, which I thought was really cool, and especially connecting to all of the lore for Guild Wars 1, especially with the humans and everything that they went through with going through the all of the gods that they had, and having the battles for one of the gods to be, that was in trouble with Abaddon and all of this stuff. And so I thought it was really cool that they were going after, another god that had overstepped his bounds. But, I mean, the Mordrim, though, and how
something about
absolutely gruesome they were, and some of the creatures that the Sylvari were turned into were incredible. And I don't think there is a way to beat the Traherne scene. Like,
That was really powerful.
it was and for me, Path of Fire was fun for story because of the aspects that I had mentioned, but I actually think that Path of Fire was almost more environmentally beautiful because
Yes.
it's like you can have certain textures and certain lighting for forest, and a lot of times it's going to look good. And while I was blown away, I've never been blown away or excited by a desert. And so the fact that I
Same.
was, right? And so like
I
it was amazing just for that. I was like, this is pretty. This is really
I
pretty. This
live
is
in a
pretty.
desert state. California is all desert. So I'm like, I can't relate. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I like the lush jungles. I like the weather of everything. So
Mhm.
100% agree with that.
And I think, and specifically for story too, I feel like the way the story is handled in the living seasons and the expansions, I actually think in core, not that the story was better, but the intervals of receiving story parts are better. And I know people don't like being time gated, and um, and the idea that you have to be a certain level for something to unlock and whatnot. Like people want to do, especially for Guild Wars 2, it's like you can do whatever you want at any time and you get experience for it, and then you might not even want to do the story and you don't have to. But for me, I feel like because I loved the world and the idea of getting all of that experience for exploring and whatnot, that I explored more because I had to wait for the story. And I'm a
Yeah.
big lore buff and I love story in video games. And so the moment that it was just available to me, there was no more story, or there was no more
Yeah.
exploring. There was no more anything else. It was just, I blew through Living Season 2. Like it was
Yeah.
just, and so I don't know if you felt that way too, or how you, like, do you like the way the story is handled, the way it's presented to you, especially with having living seasons? Because I feel like a lot of people get
Mm.
confused as to what those are. So how do you feel about that delivery?
I think the story delivery of Guild Wars 2's narrative is pretty strong. I can't think of any glaring issues that I have with it,
Mhm.
but I know that I have heard that people oftentimes get confused or they don't necessarily like how Living World is executed in terms of it's like you have to be present to get it for free.
Mhm.
And I understand that, and it is nice to have like constant updates for people to be incentivized to come back to the game, to play it for a little bit more, and all that stuff. So in term from my personal experience, I do like the system of doing expansion, living world, its current story. It kind of
Mhm.
allows it to be a bridge to the next expansion. And in terms of expansion delivery, I think I've really loved the expansions in the story.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, for Heart of Thorns, they did try to do this system where you had to get certain masteries to
Mhm.
progress. And back in the day, they actually were much more demanding. You had to get to like the maximum tier of a certain or the
Oh.
very final mastery. And a lot of people were commenting and giving feedback and said that it didn't really feel great. So they ended up changing it to be much more accessible. But I would agree with you in terms of I like to sometimes be forced to take a little bit of a step back and explore the zone that I'm in
Mhm.
and get some more understanding of that from that lore perspective. But in terms of the story itself, I think they're pretty good. The only thing I would say is like I haven't been the climaxes of each expansion haven't really left me with a like the best feeling that I was maybe hoping for. But
Mhm.
that also could just be me shooting myself in the foot and like having expectations. Like when you have expectations, you can't always succeed with
Mhm.
that in mind. But I'm really enjoying where the story is going and how it's been implemented. Um, though I would probably say the Icebrood Saga was an unfortunate happening with how quick it needed to be wrapped up.
And a lot of people have said that, and that's what I'm on living season 4 right now, but kind of taking a
Mm.
break to do the Halloween event stuff. Um, and which I think is awesome, by the way. It's so much
Really
fun.
good.
Halloween's one of my favorite holidays, so I'm just like,
Same.
and it's so like, oh my gosh, all of the minions and the decorations you can have,
The spooky ghosts.
and I almost hate candy corn now, like because of the
No,
amount that you have to farm. I'm
so
like,
much.
all of these items are so cool, and I'm looking at one, and I'm like, okay, how much candy corn will I have to farm? Oh, 30,000 pieces.
Fun.
Okay, for
Bring out
one
the whiskey.
item. Great. I know. But it's just, and so I haven't gotten to, I know people said that it felt like for Ice Brood that it was rushed towards the end, and I can't, obviously, I can't comment on that.
Yes.
But I do also feel like it was possibly to put as much emphasis on End of Dragons and what they wanted to do as possible.
Absolutely.
So I'm almost like, even if I get there and feel that way as well, I'm still happy that they're putting so much into End of Dragons. And I also understand, and a lot of people always mention this too, how I don't want to say how small the development company is, because I feel like it's almost a slight, and I don't mean for it to be, but how small the development company is compared
And
to
very impressive. Yeah.
very impressive with the amount that they've been putting out. And oh my gosh, they have so much fun presenting
Yes.
those things, and they all play their own game. I don't think I've
Mhm.
ever seen that before. Like the amount of devs that people are just like, yeah, I was hanging out, like, have you ever killed one in World v World? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Or like raiding with them and like doing open world events with them. It's lovely to see.
Absolutely. And so I guess I feel like if I got to that point, I wouldn't be as upset about it. But I do know what you were talking about with the story, and I feel like it's only because my background is WoW, which the lore is expansive, and I feel like only if you actually read the quests in certain zones would you actually get the bits and pieces that were in the game, whereas a lot of it was overarching, and you would get from like the chronicles or like books and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more filled in. And with 14, the MSQ is the game.
It's so
Like,
long.
and it's so
Massive.
long, and there are certain things that are so good, but only because they've had time to be drawn out because it's so long. And you see all of that character development and progression. And so I think coming from both of those areas to Guild Wars 2, the story, whilst very good, I totally understand with what you're saying. It's like sometimes what should be the climax feels a little bit lacking
Yeah.
in that regard.
Like, I think with each expansion, the story chapters should be 20 or more. But Heart of Thorns had 16 and Path of Fire had like 13 or 14.
Right.
So I want to feel like this is a solid expansion. I hope End of Dragons does have a really, not like, maybe not to the point of Final Fantasy 14
Right.
length,
I feel like that'd be overkill.
that would be a little overkill for an expansion. But something that is very substantial where we can play it for a decent amount of time and we can replay it and then pick up new things because it's like, oh, I didn't notice that the first time. Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, that makes more sense.
And they did say they're really going to focus on the replayability too. So that could be a factor. And like you were mentioning with all of that stuff, I feel like even in Heart of Thorns, not even the climax of it was what got my attention, but Fowlin. Like Fowlin's just
interesting character.
Like how she was depicted when she was corrupted and was a like, oh my gosh. That
we got her in that vine tooth suit and she said, I'm gonna stab you with my tail.
Yeah, I was like, I have to, and everybody in chat's like, there's a minion, and I'm like, oh my god. So I got that right away. But I think that was the highlight for me. And I feel like, again, with how heart-wrenching they wanted Path of Fire to be, I didn't even feel like that for a lot of Path of Fire. Like, I thought there was some cool stuff, and I felt bad for quite a few NPCs having that like internal struggle, like, who leads us now? Who do we look to? What are we supposed to do? And I think that's really cool. And it's very, I feel like, this is so bad to say, but I feel
say it.
That should be, guys, if you've watched the whole podcast, the term at the end, if you watch the whole thing, is that I feel like that's so bad to say. Comment that and I'll know that you watched the whole thing. But I think Heart of Thorns was very much more high fantasy for me, which is one of my favorite things. And Path of Fire was very much more because, and I don't know if it's because it was focusing on the human aspects, but very much more just morality and decision making, which can be very good stories. But for me, is like, I really like the high fantasy, gruesome horror, being creeped out type thing, or just warring with, you know, actual people, not necessarily having an internal conflict, I guess.
Yeah.
And it felt very, very human. And maybe
that's a really interesting point.
So maybe that I'm biased because of that, because I like high fantasy. Like, I love Tolkien-esque type things.
Same. I'm in the same boat. But that's actually, I've thought about this before, but I think there are very different narrative styles of the two expansions. But I think Path of Fire, they missed an opportunity of really teaching us who the Forged are and letting us like view the Forged as an entity and an enemy, like an actual character. Because it almost felt like the Forged were just a tool that they just threw at you to fight, and you're like, okay, but I don't really care about them. Like, what are their goals? And like, I know they're in servitude, but at least with the Mordrum, they had a conscience and they had dialogue that they talked to.
Oh my gosh!
And with Path of Fire, we didn't really get that, and then it was very much focused on Balthazar, and then the ending felt not maybe as rushed as Heart of Thorns, but I felt like with both expansions, the endings were kind of like, okay, get it up, done, okay, and I want them to kind of ruminate. I would have loved to have been able to at least stay in the final maps a bit longer, explored the domain of Abby, and then explore the brand, and then work your way up to Balthazar. And then there was the whole like war beast thing that we never really saw. We saw like the tool remnants of it, and at the very end, he's just like in a giant scorpion mech, and we're like, okay, that happened. So there were a couple misses for me for Path of Fire, but you also bring up very interesting points about like it being a very human moral story. It's like, is this right or wrong?
Which isn't bad. It's just not my style, I guess.
Maybe not like as greatly executed as it requires us to be like really invested in the story.
I'm not really feeling philosophical today.
Yeah. I love philosophy.
I do too. That's why it's a meme for me, because I'm just like, I could probably discuss things like that this whole time. And actually,
I love ethics.
Speaking of which, I've kept you way longer than I had intended to, and I'm sorry about that.
No problem. No worries. Great time. I love talking.
Oh, me too. But is there anything else other than this rewrite of Heart of Thorns that you're really excited about, that you're currently working on, or a future project that you could let everybody know about that you're really excited about?
I think I work in very limited time frames. I don't plan that far. I don't want to get mentally crushed.
Sometimes that's better.
Yeah. Yes, I like to live in the moment, you know. But I am definitely working on that project with the rewrite of Heart of Thorns. I actually months ago did a whole rewrite of Path of Fire that I never saw the light of day. So maybe if Heart of Thorns that's well received, maybe I'll bring that out of the graveyard and pull that back up.
Maybe I might be requesting that anyway.
Maybe we need that. But other than that, I do have a project in mind, which I might want to get some of the partners to help out with. Many partners. I'll definitely be contacting you at some point, but I need to figure out when I want to do this. I have an idea about it, but that's all I'm going to say about that. It's more so community focused.
That's exciting. I feel like there needs to be more. Okay. Again, I'm not sure how this is going to sound, but I feel like okay, so I'm so sorry. My dog is rolling around on his bed and on our bed, not his bed, our bed. And he's rolling around just like going,
I love that. No, I had a dog and he was the most talkative, so I empathize.
Okay. I appreciate it, because I'm over here like, my mic is on the complete other side of the room and it's still picking everything up. Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you.
Hi, Edward.
And he's a hound, which At least
Mm.
he's just kind of talking and not howling currently, so I guess I should feel better about. Hi, boy. Hi. Ah, it's my little pup,
Oh
Edward.
my god.
But
Big
I
voice.
feel like a lot of when I started playing Guild Wars 2, I was just like, everything is peaches and cream. Everything is so great. Everything is so good. I'm having fun with everything. And now I feel like a grizzled vet, I think. And I've only been playing for like 6 months,
Thick
but
skin.
I've been hearing a lot about the community playing alone together because of
Yeah.
the way the game is, and like having things like metas where you don't necessarily have to have your own group. You can have a commander and then just follow them around if you're in the right place at the right time. And it feels like a lot of stuff is very, if there is like events, that it's very content creator community driven or something to that effect. And so it's great that even though you're not giving us a ton of detail, it's great that you're putting something together like this, because I feel like it's necessary, honestly. Like I think the Guild Wars 2 community is a great community, and very helpful when people do ask, but I feel like a lot of it is very solo in a lot of aspects, and a lot of people like to participate in group events, but they don't like to be the person to put it together.
Yeah.
I feel
It's very
like.
daunting.
And so, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it can be. And I feel like this is really awesome. And I don't know if it's just me, but I have heard it on a couple of other videos, like Wooden Potatoes and Teapot stuff. And when I initially heard it, I was like, that's dumb. Because, like, everybody in Twitch chat, like, they don't stop talking. And then I realized in game that I was like, oh, yeah, the way that they kind of, especially having things like heart quests, like, yes, you can help out, but you don't necessarily have to say anything to anybody. And you're there for
It's that
yourself.
silent
You're not
friendship.
necessarily there. So it's an awesome thing. And I think that people do, like, people help leaps and bounds that are putting events and stuff like this together. So I think that's awesome. And I'm really excited to hear what it is.
God, thank you. Probably towards the end of the year, I'll need to start.
Which
grabbing
isn't
some
that
people.
far.
Not that far. Tomorrow.
I know. Literally, like, yeah, you know, and like I talked about with End of Dragons, I'm like, yeah, that's so far away. And then I'm like, wait, it's 2 months until December. Like, that's absolutely incredible. Like at work, one of the things that you have to do is I have to post dates for things that are 2 months away. And I just started putting December, and I'm like, when did this year start? Like, did it even start? All of the COVID stuff in the world, and
We're gonna be in 2022.
I know,
Oh
and
my
I
God.
feel like we haven't even been in 2021.
No. I don't want. Why is time going so fast?
It's
We're just all
incredible.
so busy. That's what happens.
Absolutely.
When you stay busy, you're like, okay, I'm now 45.
Mhm.
I have my knee hurts. What's happening?
And I just have a lot of respect for ArenaNet in that regard too, because it's like,
Definitely.
oh my gosh, you guys have been working on so much, and you're still doing another beta, and I'm really excited to actually see the alliances work too, because I haven't even gotten to participate in World v World yet. Or it's not that I haven't gotten to. I wanted to wait to do it with my guild.
Smart. I would recommend that. Yeah.
And so I was really excited for the first beta, and then everything happened, but I'm like, it's a beta. This is what it's
Yeah.
for. It couldn't work.
You gotta
like,
work out
hopefully-
the issues.
Right. So I'm really excited, and they're putting so much into it, and what feels like, to me, a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they've been
that's
working
all
on
of
it
us.
longer, but
Yeah. Very impressive.
But thank you so much for hanging out. If you would let everybody know again where they can find you, just in case they missed it at the beginning.
Thank you, everyone, so much for watching this podcast. I've had a wonderful time. I'm Kroof. You can find me over at YouTube at Kroof, all caps. If you want to yell it, you can. But I do a lot of videos about Guild Wars 2, Elite Specializations, gameplays, betas, soon to be lore stuff. And I'm also streaming over on Twitch Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays around 4 p.m. Pacific time. And yeah, doing more Guild Wars 2 stuff and enjoying my time so much. So thank you so much once again for having me. This has been
Of course,
really,
this
really
was
fun.
a lot of fun.
I've appreciated it.